Please sit down. I am very grateful to Father White and Father Austin for being here with us this evening, helping out in the absence of Father Godwin, and also kind of giving us that sense of what the church is. It's wonderful that we have a parish and a particular place that we can call that home, and yet we are part of something wider. We are part of something that is beyond ourselves and even our most familiar confines of St. Patrick. And the presence of two of the neighboring priests is just a reminder to us that our Catholic faith is global, is universal, the very meaning of Catholic. I'm always grateful, too, for these opportunities, especially maybe some of the smaller confirmations. We have about 31, I think, that we're doing here. I've done up to about 280, I think. So when you do some of these that are a little bit smaller, there's, at least for me, a certain feeling like you're kind of at the family table. There's something a little bit more familiar also about that. But in both cases, this continues to be, for me as the bishop, one of the really encouraging moments of the task that has been entrusted to me to be the bishop of this diocese, to be particularly with those to be confirmed, and in a special way with our young people. And that constant sense that I get interacting, especially with you, the young people, of a real desire to be good, to be a part of something good, to search for God. And that's not easy in the current day. We're going through a time where our society is becoming more and more secular. It's pushing God aside. In some ways, it's trying to push him completely out. And for our young people especially, for you, that puts a lot of pressure on you. Pressures that you probably feel all the time. Pressures that, to be known as a Christian, a Catholic, one who prays, one who goes to church, one who does the right thing, not just as sort of the family rules, but precisely because you're a friend of Jesus Christ. That does not always make you popular. Sometimes it means you got to stand alone. And we see how often that, unfortunately, is having its effect in our day. It's one of my great worries as bishop. Some of the studies that I read show that by the time young people who began where you are right now, in church, praying, searching for God in your Catholic faith, by the time young people of this beginning get to about 30, about 60 to 80% have fallen away. Fallen away from their Catholic faith, from faith. Now, obviously that means 20 to 40% is still there. So that's obviously a great seed, it's a great hope. But those numbers are very worrisome. And they're worrisome because each and every one of us, including you, is going to stand before God one day, stand before Jesus Christ alone, and you're going to answer a question about life. And Jesus' question is going to be pretty simple, really. It'll have a lot of implications to it, but the question is going to be this: did you love me? Did you love me in your lifetime? Tell me how. Tell me what you did to show that you loved me. To push God aside is the opposite of that. What you're here for, your faith, the fulfillment of things, that's to love Christ. But I know how worrisome this can be with all the pressures. I was talking to some grandparents after Mass a week or two ago, and they said to me last night, they were really heartbroken. They said, last night Our 17-year-old grandson came up and said, Grandpa, I don't believe in God anymore. Now, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's a moment of young confusion. But just think of that, a life where you don't believe in God. And if you ever have that doubt, think about it the next time you step outside at night and it's clear and you just look up at the stars and you say, what? Did that just happen? That came from nowhere? It had to come from God. Or think about this. Have any of you ever held a newborn or a recently born baby? I see at least one head nodding out there. Nobody wants to raise their hand quite yet. But think about that. Maybe your brother and sister, maybe a cousin, maybe next door neighbors. You hold that child. You even got to support the head when they're that young because they can't even hold up their head. And you look at that child and you say, where did you come from? You know there's a God. So, it's so important to get your orientation right, to get your life right, because we will meet Christ. And we want to stand, as the gospel tells us, with our head held high when that moment comes and say, yes, Lord, I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting to meet you. I've been waiting to be able to tell you. And that's what this is a part of this evening. Because God knows all of the things that you're going through, especially young people. He knows all of the pressures. But here's the thing. He knows you. And he has known you forever. Since before the clock started running on the world, he knew everybody here. Not just this photograph of faces in the crowd, but he knows each and every heart and has always known each and every heart, and he knows yours. And he knows the things in your heart that make you sad, that make you laugh. He knows everything you've ever done that was good that nobody else saw. He knows the things you need to be forgiven for. He knows the things that you worry about. He knows the things that you think about at night when you go to bed that you've never talked to anybody about. All of that he knows. And God, for all eternity, is saying, I love them so much that I don't want them to go through this alone because it's hard. I'm going to give them my help. I'm going to give them my own Spirit. I am going to be with them at each and every moment. That's what this is about. You are receiving something today that you've had a foretaste of. You had the gift of the Holy Spirit first given to you at baptism, but now it's being completed. Because God has loved you and wants you to be with him. So that means I have to ask you to do something here this evening, each one of you, young and not so young. But every one of you that is going to be confirmed, I need you to do something that we can't do for you. It can't be done by this whole group. You have to do it individually, and it is this. I'm going to ask each one of you to commit right here in front of your bishop, in front of Father White, in front of Father Austin, in front of your sponsors, in front of your family members that are here, to commit a blatant act of faith. And the blatant act of faith is this. It is honest to goodness to open your mind and heart and say, I believe it is true. I believe the God of all eternity so loves me, he's going to put his Holy Spirit within me. Now, your first thought might be to say, I don't know what that means. Well, you know what? I don't either. Not really, because it is beyond us. It's God reaching down to us. But the fact that I don't understand everything, I can still believe it. I do that all the time. I don't understand things, but I believe them. I walk into a dark room. I flip the switch. I have to tell you, I do not know how electricity works. What do? Do they put a lightning bolt in those wires coming to my lamp? I don't know. But I believe that when I hit the switch, the light's going to go on. The ball game's on tonight. I flip the switch on my TV. How the heck do they get the ball game from wherever to my living room? I don't know that. But I set my watch and I believe at 7:30 it's going to come on. Why would you hold God to a higher standard? We do this all the time. A blatant act of faith that it's true. And if it's true, then you're also accepting something else. And that's to live like friends of Jesus Christ, because that's what our faith is. You're to live like those who've received the Holy Spirit. What would that mean? Well, it would mean, first of all, living out our friendship with Jesus Christ by coming to Mass each and every Sunday and Holy Day. Now, sometimes people get a little nervous when I say that because they're saying, well, I'm not doing that now. Okay, fine. It starts today. It's one of the requirements, it's one of the consequences of being a friend of Jesus Christ. It means that I'll keep going to confession. Because even your best friendship in school, from time to time, best friends have to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. And then when there's forgiveness, the friendship is purified. It's strengthened. It's deepened. It will mean living purity and chastity until marriage. It will mean avoiding alcohol and drugs and cutting and bad language and bad friends, because all of those things darken and harden our heart against the Holy Spirit. It'll mean witnessing. Witnessing to life. Standing up for the unborn, for those who are close to death. It'll mean witnessing, and I know this can be hard today, to marriage and family and God's plan for marriage between a man and a woman, open to children, to you, young people, the future for a lifetime. It'll mean witnessing to the poor, witnessing to the immigrant. How about witnessing in your own class? You know, every class I've ever known, they've always got one or two young people who are like nobody's friend, are always kind of on the outs, are always kind of laughed at. How about witnessing to Jesus Christ by kindness to them? Sometimes I hear from young people that that's asking an awful lot. You're asking what adults are supposed to be doing. But you know, we are a church that's full of young saints who committed their own blatant act of faith. You've all taken a saint now for your confirmation. Did anybody take as their saint Teresa of Lisieux? Saint Teresa? Ah, there is one. Okay. Sometimes, you know, if I wait, it's a little bit like waiting for the daffodils in the springtime. If you wait long enough, they'll come up. Did anybody take Jose Sanchez del Rio from Mexico? Josecito from Mexico? Okay, 1 for 2. Still not bad. Did anybody take my favorite saint, Joan of Arc? There's one. All right, I've 2 out of 3. Did anybody take Maria Goretti? Okay, 2 for 4. The Cubs would love to have me. Why do I bring up these saints, and there could be others? They are young saints who began where you are now. They were young, they prayed, and they made a blatant act of faith, and they lived it. Teresa of Lisieux writes that when she was 12 years old, she began to feel God moving her to pray for sinners. And so she prayed one time particularly for a guy who was condemned to death. He had committed some terrible crime. He's on death row. She hears about him. Everybody's talking about him. She prays for him, and she reads in the paper a day or two later when everyone says, yeah, he was executed. The last thing he did, he reached out and he took the cross and he kissed the cross. And she said at age 12, my prayers were answered. Jose Sanchez del Rio was in the revolution in Mexico in 1913 when the government was so oppressing the church, tried to exterminate the church, and the people fought back. So he's captured, fighting for the church. And they say, "We will kill you unless you renounce Jesus Christ." What would you do if you were faced with that choice? Would you find an excuse? Would you find... He said, "Long live Jesus Christ," and he gave his life. Joan of Arc was 13 when she began to hear the voices of the saints that led her to lead the armies of France and then die a death alone, faithful to Jesus Christ, to her faith. And then there's Maria Goretti. Do you know the story of Maria? She was 2 months short of 12 years old. So she's 11 years, 10 months. She has 4 younger siblings. Her family is very poor. They live in southern Italy. Her dad is a farm worker, a field worker, barely scratching out enough to feed. And then he dies. And so her mother has to go work the fields to take his place so they got anything. And they're living in a house with a nasty man and his 18-year-old son who is also nasty. A bad situation, but they had no money. So Maria is left in the house. She's got to do the cleaning, taking care of the kids, and the cooking. Well, as you can imagine, an 18-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl in the house is not a healthy moment. And the 18-year-old boy, who's nasty, begins to take an unhealthy attraction to Maria. And he asks her to give up her purity, and she will not. So one day when they're alone, mother's out in the fields, whatever, he calls the question, he forces the question. And she says no, because it would be a sin. Because to do it, Alessandro, the guy's name, you will go to hell for this. And so when she will not give in, he takes not a knife, but a real pointy, sharp instrument. And 11 times he stabs her. And he leaves her and he goes away. And a little while later, I don't know if he hears her groan or he hears her roll over or something, she's still alive. He goes back and he does 3 more, 14 times. To be faithful to Christ, she took the stab wounds. They find Maria. They take her to what passes for a hospital in this poor area. There's nothing they can do for her. They know that. She's in agony. She lasts a day. But during that day, she says, "I forgive Alessandro." Ladies, could you do that? Could you forgive? And then she says, "I want him to be with me when I'm in heaven." So he gets convicted, goes to prison, and he's as nasty in prison as he is in the house. And he writes that 8 years into his prison sentence, one day, either a dream or a vision, there's Maria coming to him, and she's holding 14 lilies, 1 for each stab wound. She gets to him, and she begins to hand them to him one by one, but as he takes them, they turn from being lilies into burning points of light. Because forgiveness is never free. You have to admit what you've done. You have to convert. You have to know what you have done and what's the pain that you have caused. But he did accept that. And he converts, and he knew that it was Maria that had done this for him. And he completely changed his life in prison. He then got out early for good behavior. And the first thing he did was he went to see Maria's mother. And he said, "I have come to apologize." And her mother said, "If my daughter could forgive you, how can I not forgive you?" Mothers, would you be able to forgive under those circumstances? Then the two of them went across the piazza, went across the square with everybody watching, and they went to Mass together. What's the point of all of this? The point is that every one of those young people and others began where you are. They had no more courage than you probably feel right now. They may have had some of the doubts that you probably feel right now. But they made that act of faith, and they trusted Christ, and they prayed, and they went to Mass, and they were faithful to stand before him and answer that question, did you love me? Tell me how. You can do it. Make that act of faith as you come up to be confirmed. The act of faith that the God of all infinity loves you so much, he's placing his Spirit within you. And then when you leave today, be proud. Be proud that you have the Holy Spirit. Be proud of being a friend of Jesus Christ. Be proud of your Catholic faith.